They wheeled her out like a broken cart left in the sun. Just past the last fence post of town, where dust lingered longer and laughter never came, Rosemary sat alone. Her hands were tied with coarse rope, not because she was dangerous, but because it was easier that way. Easier to pretend she hadn't once been the pride of her family, the fastest girl on a horse, the one who sang in church like her lungs knew heaven. Now she couldn't walk, and somehow that made her unworthy of everything else. People didn't visit. They glanced and passed, said she was cursed, said the fall from that horse knocked something loose in her soul, not just her legs. Said a woman who couldn't stand was a woman no man would ever kneel for, except him. He didn't speak when he arrived, just walked up slow, took off his hat, and knelt like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time in weeks, Rosemary looked someone in the eyes. He didn't ask what happened, and she didn't have to explain, because in that silence something shifted, and for the first time in weeks, she felt seen. She didn't speak the next day either, nor the one after that. The man with the sun-worn hat came back at dawn, each time the sky still pale and yawning. He didn't bring food, he didn't bring flowers, he brought himself, and that was more than anyone else had. Some days he sat on the ground, some days on the overturned crate that used to hold nails. Once he stood the whole morning with arms crossed, squinting toward the distance, saying nothing. And she let him. Rosemary had learned that words were a luxury people used when they felt safe. She didn't feel safe. Not in this body, not in this place. The rope was gone now, cut silently on the third morning with his old penknife. He didn't make a show of it, just worked at the knot while she looked away. When it came loose, he tucked the knife back in his boot and stepped back like he hadn't done a thing worth noticing. Still, she noticed. The wheelchair creaked when she shifted. Her legs hadn't moved much, not since the fall. There was still some feeling, pins and needles like insects crawling just under the skin, but not enough to trust her own weight. They said she was lucky to be alive. She wasn't sure. The chair had become a coffin on wheels, but he kept showing up. One morning, a breeze caught the hem of her dress and lifted it just enough for her to see the mud stains were finally drying. She looked up and found him watching. Not the stains, not her legs, but her face. She frowned. He nodded once like he understood. His name was Jonas. She heard it accidentally, a week in, when someone passed by and spat near his boots. Careful, Dwyer. Don't want to catch her curse. He didn't flinch, just brushed his hand over his hat brim and stayed seated. Dwyer. She mouthed it when he wasn't looking. It sounded like stone, like something the river couldn't move. One afternoon, clouds bruised the sky, and the scent of iron hung heavy in the air. Jonas arrived with a blanket and draped it gently across her knees. Still no words, but when the first drop fell, he pulled his crate closer under the flap of her tent and sat beside her, shoulders barely brushing. Thunder rolled, horses snorted in the distance, but neither moved. She turned her head. "You're not from here." It wasn't a question. He didn't answer anyway. "Neither am I," she added, her voice dry from disuse. He turned his head slightly, and for the first time, she saw the scar across his cheek. Thin, like a cracked eggshell, curving from jaw to ear. She didn't ask. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, yes, but like soil over a seed. Something was growing in it, slowly, painfully, but surely. By the second week, she started telling him things. Not all at once, but in pieces. Her name, her horse's name, the exact moment she fell, how she could still hear the snap of the branch, the crush of her ribs, how her brother hadn't even come to the clinic, how her father said, "You were supposed to marry, not shatter." Jonas didn't interrupt, didn't console. He just sat through every sentence like it mattered. One morning she cried, no noise, just tears crawling out on their own, stubborn as weeds. He passed her a cloth without looking. That night she dreamed she was standing again. Not walking, not running, just standing, barefoot in a field, wind tugging her hair. She woke up with her fingers clutching the armrest like it was her anchor. And then he arrived again, every morning like sunrise. 3 weeks in, he spoke. "You want coffee?" She blinked. "What?" He motioned to the pot over the small fire he'd built behind the tent. The tin mug in his hand steamed faintly. He poured a second and set it on the crate between them. Then silence again. But it was warmer now. The coffee was bitter, burnt, but it tasted like something real, something made. "You built this fire?" she asked, sipping slowly. He nodded. "I thought you were just sitting." He gave a half smile. "Been doing both a long time." And that was all. Later that week, she asked, "Why do you come back?" He didn't answer right away, just looked out at the field stretching west, where the wheat bent like old men in the wind. "Don't know," he said finally. "Guess I got tired of being the only ghost in town." She stared at him. "You think I'm a ghost?" "No." He looked at her now fully. "I think you're trying not to disappear." She didn't have an answer to that, and she didn't need one, because that night, after he left, she wheeled herself 3 feet forward for the first time, and it felt like flight. The morning wind was softer than usual. It carried the scent of hay and old iron, things Jonas brought with him. He came with tools this time, not for her, not for the chair, but for the tent's broken hinge. He worked quietly, whistling under his breath, not a melody, but a pattern, rhythmic, predictable, like someone marking time in a world that forgot to count. Rosemary watched him from her chair, fingers curled around the blanket folded in her lap. She didn't interrupt. The sound was comforting, like footsteps on a wooden porch, or the way flour hit a mixing bowl, small things that meant life was still happening around her. "You fix things?" she asked when he stopped for a sip of water. He shrugged. "Only the ones that don't fight back." She smiled. Not wide, not warm, but real. By noon, the sun grew pushy, shoving light into the corners of her eyes. Jonas set up a second cloth above her chair, a makeshift shade. She didn't ask him to. He didn't ask if she wanted it. There was something sacred in that, being helped without being handled. Her arms still worked fine, strong from the effort of moving the wheels back and forth, even if just in short circles near the tent. She'd started doing that now, a few feet forward, a few back, turning, reversing, remembering. "I used to dance," she said suddenly, later that afternoon. Jonas glanced over, but said nothing. Not well, not proper, just when no one was looking. The wind stirred her hair. She tilted her head back to feel it on her neck. There was this song, fiddle and banjo, played every third Saturday by the general store. I'd go with my sisters. They'd wait to be asked. I didn't wait. He smiled. That sounds right. She narrowed her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing bad, he said, holding up a hand. Just, you don't seem like someone who waits for permission. I used to be. Her voice was quieter now. Until the fall. Then I started waiting on everything. Waiting for someone to help me up. Waiting for my legs to remember. Waiting for my family to come back. Jonas looked at her long and slow, then turned his eyes to the dirt. Some folks don't come back, even if they're standing right next to you. It hung there between them like a bell that had just been struck. That evening, after he left, Rosemary wheeled herself again, past the edge of the tent this time, just far enough to touch the fence with her fingertips. The wood was warm, familiar, grounding. She thought about what he said. People didn't come back, but some showed up, and that mattered more. The next morning she was waiting, hair tied back, dressed cleaner than it had been in weeks, hands resting calmly on the armrests like she'd always meant to be seen this way. Jonas nodded once when he arrived. Acknowledgement, not praise. He brought a small stool this time, for her feet. You gonna fix those too? She asked, nodding down. He raised an eyebrow. Don't seem broken. She blinked, not at the joke, but the meaning. They sat for a while in easy quiet. Birds chirped beyond the canvas walls. A horse snorted lazily nearby. Someone's hammer clanged from a wagon repair shop not far off. I dreamed again last night, she said. Standing? She shook her head. Running. Through water. He didn't reply. But this time I wasn't scared. I wasn't trying to get away from anything. I just liked the splash. Jonas stirred the fire, poking at a coal that refused to catch. My brother used to race me down to the creek, he said slowly. I always let him win. He never knew. Rosemary smiled. That's cruel. It made him brave, Jonas replied. Sometimes lying makes people stronger. She tilted her head. Is that what you do? Lie to make people stronger? He met her eyes. Only when they deserve better than what's true. The words sunk in like rain after a dry spell. Later that week, Rosemary asked for a favor. Help me out of this thing. Jonas froze. You sure? She nodded. I want to feel the ground. He said nothing more. Just moved slow, careful as prayer. He crouched beside her, one hand behind her back, the other steadying her knees. Together they shifted. She slid down, dress catching on the footrest, hands gripping his forearm tighter than she meant to. Her knees hit the earth, not hard but honest. She exhaled. Jonas stepped back, giving her space. Her fingers reached down, curling into the dirt. The texture, the grit, the weight, it all returned to her in waves. She closed her eyes. People think broken means done, she whispered. Jonas knelt beside her, not touching, just there. But some things need to crack before they grow. He nodded. Like seeds. Exactly. They stayed like that until her legs trembled too hard to hold her. Then he lifted her back, slow, steady, silent. And this time, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt carried. By the end of that week, she wheeled herself to the water trough and back. Twice. No help. She didn't make a sound when she did it. Not a triumphant yell, not even a gasp. But when Jonas arrived that evening and saw the trail in the dirt, the wide arc of wheels, the double pass, he didn't ask a thing. He just nodded. And when he left that night, she smiled. The next morning, the world shifted. Jonas didn't show up at his usual hour. Rosemary waited, first in her chair, then at the edge of the tent. By noon, she was staring down the road, eyes narrowed against the glare. No footsteps, no firewood bundle, no shadow slipping between buildings like it belonged nowhere and everywhere. He didn't come. By sunset, her heart was thudding louder than her wheels. She told herself not to care. He was just a man, just a visitor. People left. They always did. But still, she sat in silence longer than usual that night. The wind was colder, her fingers trembled, and she hated how empty the air felt without him in it. He returned 2 days later, left arm in a sling, shirt torn, dust clinging to his face like shame. She didn't ask what happened. She wanted to, but something about his gait, slow, stiff, uneven, told her the answer wouldn't come easy. He sat like he'd never left, laid the old crate down beside her, slower than usual, and exhaled like the whole sky had been sitting on his chest. I thought you weren't coming back, she said quietly. He looked at her, not with guilt, with grief. Didn't plan on leaving. She nodded, waiting, but he didn't explain. Instead, he pulled a small object from his coat pocket, a tin bird, crude, misshapen, barely an inch long. It looked like it had been hammered out of scrap and sorrow. He held it out. For your windowsill, he said. I don't have a window. He nodded. Then call it hope. She took it gently, turned it over in her palm. The edges were rough, the wings uneven, but it looked like it was still trying to fly. She set it on the crate between them. I like it broken, she said. Me too. And for the first time, they both laughed. Not long, not loud, but enough. As summer wore on, they fell into rhythm. Not lovers, not quite friends, but something softer, stronger, like the way cottonwood trees hold shape in a storm, not resisting, not bending too far, just staying. Jonas didn't press her to talk. Rosemary didn't beg him to share. But little by little, pieces of their stories fell into the spaces between them. He used to ride with the railroad crews, surveying, marking, clearing. One day he didn't come home. No letters, no trail. When he did return, his wife had remarried. Thought he'd died in the floods. He never corrected her. Was it easier that way? Rosemary asked one night. Jonas threw another twig into the fire. For her, maybe. And for you? He looked at her. I got used to silence. She didn't fill it, just reached for the tin bird and held it a little closer. Then came the letter, from her sister, folded crooked, ink smudged. Papa says you can come back now. Says you've punished yourself enough. Rosemary read it twice, then a third time, slower. She didn't cry. She didn't rip it. She just set it down and whispered, I wasn't punishing myself. They were. Jonas watched her carefully. You gonna go? She shook her head. You don't go back to places that made you disappear. He didn't argue. Instead, he stood, walked to the back of his wagon and returned with a wooden box, set it at her feet. I found something, he said. She opened the lid. Inside, pieces of a chair, wheels, bolts, wood, leather, polished, repaired. It's yours, he said, but stronger now, lighter. She stared at it. I don't need fixing, she said. He didn't flinch. I know, but your chair did. She looked up at him, really looked, and in that moment she saw it. Not pity, not penance, but partnership. That night she wheeled herself beyond the edge of the tent, all the way to the bench in front of the general store. People stared. She stared back, and Jonas sat beside her. Not behind, not pushing, beside. They didn't speak, didn't need to, because the town could whisper all it wanted. She had her own name again, and someone who stayed. They said she didn't belong there. Not in front of the store, not on that bench, not in that chair, and certainly not beside a man like Jonas Dwyer. Whispers followed her now, not the kind that slithered quietly into shadows, but the ones that clung, loud enough to hear, soft enough to deny. She's still here? Thought her people took her back. Didn't he lose a wife? Now he's collecting broken things? Jonas never responded, but Rosemary heard every word. She pretended not to. Every morning he helped her from the wagon. Every evening she wheeled herself back without asking. He didn't offer. She didn't expect. That unspoken respect sat stronger between them than the stairs. But still, it wore her down, like wind against old stone. One morning she didn't come out. Jonas waited, leaning against the wagon wheel, thumbs hooked through his belt. After a while he knocked once on the sideboard. No answer. Again softer. Still nothing. He was about to leave when he heard it. I'm tired. Her voice muffled, small. I'm tired of being the story no one wants to finish. He pressed his forehead against the wood. Let the silence settle. You're not a story, he said. You're the damn ending. Later that week, she rolled into the saloon. Every conversation halted. A glass dropped. One man muttered, this place ain't for her. Another whispered, she'll scare off the music. But she didn't turn back. She wheeled herself to the bar, lifted her chin, and asked for a coffee. The barkeep hesitated, then poured it. Her hands didn't shake. And when she turned around, Jonas was there, hat in hand, proud as thunder. She didn't smile. Didn't need to. The way he looked at her said everything. That night, she placed the tin bird on the saloon's front step. Let the wind carry it wherever it wanted, because she didn't need it anymore. She wasn't hoping, she was living. The next day, the chair broke. Not completely, but the left wheel jammed against a rock, and the whole frame pitched forward. Rosemary tumbled hard, palms scraped, knee bruised. She didn't scream, but the breath knocked from her chest. Jonas was there in seconds. She pushed him away. I can do it. He crouched beside her, not touching, just present. She tried twice. Failed twice. The third time, she got one knee under. By the fifth, she was sitting upright again. He offered her water. She didn't take it. Instead, she said, it still counts if you fall. He nodded. Sometimes it counts more. They sat there in the dirt, sweat on their brows, dust in their lungs. And then she laughed. A real laugh. Sharp, loud, free. He laughed too. And for the first time, the whole town turned to look. But this time, it wasn't out of pity. It was out of something that looked like awe. That evening, Jonas brought her a gift, wrapped in canvas, tied with twine. Inside, a pair of boots, small, soft-soled, light as feathers. I thought, maybe not for walking, he said, stumbling over the words, but for feeling. Earth, wood floors, rain. She stared at them, then slipped them on. Her feet twitched. Not a miracle, but a spark. I used to dance barefoot, she whispered. I know, he said. She looked at him. How? I listened. Her eyes filled, but didn't spill. Instead, she held out her hand. He took it. No kiss, no confession. Just the quiet clasp of something beginning. Something brave. Days passed. The town didn't change overnight. Some still stared. Some still whispered. But others nodded. Others waved. Others asked if she needed something. Not out of charity, but out of choice. She said no most times. She was learning to ask only when it mattered. And Jonas, he was always there. Not leading, not following. Just with her. One evening while they sat beside the creek outside town, she said, You don't talk much about her. Jonas didn't pretend to misunderstand. My wife? She nodded. He picked at a blade of grass. She loved the sky, said it never judged her. Always looked the same, no matter what kind of mess she was. Rosemary said nothing. She was kind, bright, but she needed someone who could fix everything. He looked up at her. I'm not that man anymore. Rosemary reached out, touched his wrist. Good. He blinked. Because I don't need fixing either. That night when he walked her back to the wagon, she leaned slightly toward him, shoulder to shoulder, not for balance, not for help, just because it felt right. And for the first time, he didn't step aside. The letter came folded neat, tied with blue string. Jonas found it tucked between 2 sacks of flour on his wagon bench just before sunrise. No name, just the handwriting, small, tight, unmistakably Rosemary's. He didn't open it right away. Instead, he carried it in his coat pocket all morning, like it might warm through the fabric. Like maybe it wasn't meant to be read so much as carried. When he finally sat down beside her that evening, she didn't ask if he'd read it. He just nodded once, and she exhaled, like she'd been holding the air in her chest for days. Didn't want to say it out loud, she said. You did. She turned to look at him. You okay with that? I'm not scared of hard truths, he said, just ones that stay buried. The letter had been simple, not poetic, not fragile, just real. They said I was cursed. You never flinched. They said I'd be a burden. You brought me coffee and silence. They said I'd be alone. But you keep showing up, so I think maybe they don't know everything. It wasn't a love letter, but it was love, and Jonas knew the difference. That week she tried something new, walking, sort of, with a cane. He didn't suggest it, didn't buy it. She found it herself, an old thing rusting behind the blacksmith's shed, smoothed the handle, polished the tip, took one trembling step, then another. Jonas didn't hover. He watched from the porch, mug in hand, heart in his throat. She fell on the second try. He didn't move. She cursed, loud, ugly. Then she laughed. Then she stood. Why do you stay? She asked him one afternoon while mending the hem of her dress. He didn't look up. Because I don't believe in lost causes. She raised an eyebrow. And what am I? A cause worth choosing, he said. That shut her up, but not in a bad way, in the kind of way that makes silence holy. Later that week, Jonas took her to the north field. No one lived there anymore. Just an old barn with half a roof, a tree that still bloomed despite the wind, and a plot of land where the wild grass bowed easy. This was my father's, he said. She ran her hand along the fence. You ever think of fixing it up? I do now. She turned to him slowly. Jonas. He held her gaze. Not asking you for anything, just showing you something. She felt it then, the space he was offering her. Not as a favor, not as rescue, but as choice. And choice was a language she hadn't spoken in years. That night, she wheeled herself to his wagon instead of waiting by hers. She didn't knock, just sat. When he stepped out, surprised, she said, I've been on my own for so long I forgot what being chosen feels like. He didn't interrupt. So if you mean it, about the field, about the house, about this, she waved vaguely between them, then I need you to understand something. He waited. I'm not easy. I'll fall again. I'll get angry. I'll hate this chair some days. I'll miss dancing. I'll need time. He knelt beside her, not to lower himself, not to comfort, but to meet her. And then, for the first time, he said it. I don't want easy. The next morning, the saloon keeper brought them bread. Said nothing, just nodded. That afternoon, a young boy offered to help push her cart at the general store. She declined kindly, but the gesture stayed with her. By sundown, a woman named June, whose husband had once made fun of Rosemary behind a whiskey glass, approached with a basket of tomatoes. They're bruised, she said, sheepish, but still good. Rosemary took them, bruised but still good, like all the best things. That night, as stars spilled careless across the sky, Jonas laid down 2 hammers and a blueprint on the crate between them. I was thinking, he said. Dangerous, she teased. He smiled. The porch will face west, so you can see the light go even when your legs get tired. She looked at him, really looked. And in her eyes he saw something new. Not hope, not dependence, but home. The chair still creaked. The cane still slipped. But the girl in the chair, she didn't. Not anymore. The first hammer swing came at dawn. Jonas didn't announce it. Didn't wait for a crowd. Just rolled up his sleeves, planted his boots in the earth, and drove the nail home. One strike, then another. Rosemary watched from the crate under the cottonwood, her hands wrapped around a warm mug, steam curling into her cheeks like memory. You're early, she said. You're awake. She smiled. Guess that makes us even. The house wasn't much yet, just wood frames and outlines scratched in dirt. But to Rosemary it looked like intention, and nothing had been built for her in a long, long time. She offered to help. Jonas hesitated. Don't you dare say no, she warned, eyebrows raised. So he nodded once. Slow. Start with sorting the nails. She did, then counted the hinges, then lined up boards by size, pointing out a cracked one he hadn't noticed. You've got an eye, he said. I've got time, she replied. By noon, sweat beaded his neck. Her sleeves were rolled high. Dirt lined her palms like she was born into it. And maybe she had been. Just didn't know it till now. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. The rhythm of it, the lift, the place, the pound, was its own kind of conversation. At one point, Jonas looked up and found her staring at the half-framed doorway. What? He asked. She shrugged. Just picturing the porch swing. He nodded. Facing west. Always, she said. The clouds rolled in that evening. Fast, low, gray with warning. Jonas stopped mid-strike, turned his face to the wind. Storms early, he muttered. How bad? He didn't answer. Instead, he began covering the lumber with canvas, pulling old ropes tight. She tried to help. He didn't stop her this time. Their hands met over the same corner, hers shaking, his steady. Back to the wagon, he said. Now. By the time they reached it, the wind howled like a wounded dog. Dust swirled. Branches snapped. Jonas lifted her gently into the back, laid a wool blanket over her lap, and tied down the shutters. She didn't protest, didn't flinch. Just asked, have you seen one like this before? Once, he said. She waited. He didn't elaborate, so she reached for his wrist, found it taut, pulse steady. I trust you, she whispered. It was the first time she'd said it, and it landed deeper than rain. The storm hit hard. The roof creaked. Thunder cracked close like it had teeth, but they stayed dry, warm, and together. Jonas lit a lantern, set it on the crate between them. His hands trembled only once, when he brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek and didn't pull away fast enough. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she pulled something from her pocket, the tin bird. It had made it through the storm. He looked at her then, really looked. And for a moment, it was like the storm was outside time, and they were inside something untouched. By morning, the storm had passed. The frame still stood. The tree still bloomed. The earth was soaked, but not broken. Jonas stepped out first, checked the foundation, whispered something to the boards like a man blessing the stubborn. When Rosemary wheeled up beside him, he turned to her and said, "Looks like it held." She smiled. So did we. That afternoon, he moved a second chair into the wagon, not because she asked, not because she needed, but because sitting together had always been better than sitting alone. That night, they shared bread and stories. He told her about the time he got kicked by a mule and swore off stubborn animals. until he met her. She laughed so hard her stomach hurt. Then she told him about the first boy who kissed her, who ran crying when her father found out. Jonas chuckled. Brave soul. Not really, she said. You'd have stayed. He nodded. I did. When they lay down, backs to opposite walls, lantern still glowing faint, she whispered, You didn't ask me. Ask what? If I want to stay. With you, for real. He didn't answer right away. Then, I figured you already did. Silence. Then, you figured right. The rain returned gently that night, but it didn't scare them, because some storms bring ruin, and others bring roots. They moved in before the roof was done. No ceremony, no ribbon, just 2 chairs and one shared silence. The walls still breathed sawdust. The floorboards creaked like they were learning how to hold memory. But the sun came in through the half-hung window, and that was enough. For now. Rosemary wheeled to the middle of the room and stopped. This is ours, she said. Jonas leaned his hammer against the frame. Was always gonna be. She turned in a slow circle. There's no table yet, no stove. The bedroom's just dirt and moonlight. He walked to her, hands dusty, boots scuffed. But there's light, he said, and a place to rest. She looked up at him, eyes shining, and someone to rest beside. The porch was her favorite part. They built it last, together. He held the planks while she nailed. She painted the railing. He carved a tiny bird into one post when she wasn't looking, slanted, misshapen, but unmistakably trying to fly. When she found it, she didn't say a word. She just pressed her hand over it like a promise. Word spread fast. That the broken girl had a house now. That she didn't live out there anymore. That the man with no words and the woman with no walk had built something no one else could. People came, quietly. June brought curtains. The young boy from the store dropped off a pie, burnt at the edges but sweet in the middle. Even her father showed up. He stood at the fence for nearly half an hour, didn't step past it, didn't call her name, just looked at the house, at her, at Jonas, who stood without flinching. Then he tipped his hat and left. She didn't cry, didn't ache. She just whispered, I don't need their doors anymore. I've got my own. Fall came early that year. The leaves turned fast, then let go, like they'd finally stopped holding on for the wrong reasons. Rosemary started walking 10 steps a day, with the cane, then without it. Sometimes she stumbled, sometimes she didn't. But every time she looked up, he was there, not offering his hand, just waiting, like he always had, like he always would. One night they danced. It wasn't planned, no music, no audience, just a breeze through the window and the smell of stew cooling too fast. He held out his hand. She raised her eyebrows. You know I can't. Doesn't matter. So she stood, leaned slightly, balanced softly, and stepped into him. One step, another. Her cheek found his shoulder. His hand found her back. And the world didn't spin. It settled. They swayed in the middle of the unfinished kitchen. And for once, she didn't remember how she used to dance. She remembered how it felt to be chosen, again and again, with both feet on the floor and none of them needing to run. That winter, they built a fire that never went out, took turns feeding it, telling stories, not of what they'd lost, but what they'd kept. She wrote letters now, not to her family, to herself. Jonas carved, small things, handles, buttons, tokens. Every piece found a place in the house. She taught herself to bake again, burned the first 3 loaves. He ate them anyway. They fought sometimes. He forgot to cover the roof seam. She spilled oil on his maps, but the fights never grew taller than the walls, and love never needed to knock. It already lived there. The day the porch swing was finally hung, they watched the sun dip behind the fields together. No words, just her hand on his thumb brushing the back of hers. A shared breath in a home they'd built one nail, one kindness, one morning at a time. And when he finally said it, I love you. She didn't freeze, didn't deflect. She smiled like she'd known it all along. I know, she whispered. Me too. And then they sat back, Let the sky turn gold. Let the crickets sing. Let the world pass by a little slower, because they'd learn something the hard way. Some storms break you, some storms bury you, but the right storm, it shows you where to build and who to build with. They didn't ride off into the sunset. There were no grand weddings, no fireworks, just a porch that faced west and two people who kept showing up. Maybe love isn't about fixing the broken. Maybe it's about seeing the cracks and choosing to stay anyway. Because Jonas didn't save her, and Rosemary, she didn't need to be saved. She just needed someone to believe the broken chair wasn't the end of her story, that a heart can still dance even when the legs don't. And maybe that's what love really means. Choosing to build a home, not for who someone was, but for who they're still becoming. What about you? Did this story remind you of someone you once stood beside, even when the world turned away? Or maybe someone who waited for you to take that first shaky step? Tell us in the comments. Who did you think about while watching? And if you had to build a house that faced somewhere, where would you point the porch? We'll be reading every word. And maybe, just maybe, so will Jonas and Rosemary.